A very good morning to all. In today's session, we are all going to learn what is all about business environment, its scope, and its importance. What are the factors that actually influence the business environment? So let's begin with the meaning of business environment. Business environment refers to all those external factors and internal factors which are ultimately influence and affect the operation, tasks, and performances of the organization. And such factors which includes financial, technological, human, marketing, mechanical, political, legal, social, as well as technological components which ultimately influence the operations of the company. And whatever the impact of these variables, which always influence the organizational well being in terms of their own challenges and opportunities. So, when we talk about business environment, it always essential to for all those organizations to adapt to change and innovate the environment, make sound decisions on whatever the changes or the on important matters, and keep up the objective and the industry commitment. When we talk about the external forces or external factors which ultimately influence the environment, but in the modern scenario, it's not external factors, but as well as the internal factors will also influence the business environment, and ultimately the internal as well as the external forces which always have an impact on the business activities. So this is the exact meaning of the business environment. Let's talk about the definitions of business environment. There are three main authors which has given their own definitions of business environment. When we talk about Keith Davis, it he defined the business environment as an aggregate of all those conditions, events, and influences that actually exist and affect the whole business. When we talk about the Beyond O. Wheeler, he also defined the total of all those external forces which affects their organization on operations in terms of operated by firms and industries. When we talk about the Inter M. Wiener, he also defined the business environment, which refers to a set of conditions, economic, social, political, and institutional. In other words, it refers to all those external forces where the business operations are conducted. So these are the three main definitions of business environment. Let's talk about the characteristics of business environment. The first one is complex. So when we talk about the complexity, there are different forces of business environment which are interrelated to each other, and of course the interdependent. When we talk about technological, we talk about the political. So technological and the political are interrelated and interdependent. And in this particular sense, it was very difficult that how much the influence the organization face on in this particular factors or external forces. Let's take an example on this particular characteristic. The economic liberalization in India since 1991 has opened up the new opportunities for private sector and foreign entrepreneurs. So in this particular example, it came to know that you can say the liberalization, the economic factors is always influenced positively to create a new opportunities for the private and the foreign, you can say, sectors as well as the entrepreneurs. The second characteristic of business environment is dynamic. So dynamic means to keep or update the environment from time to time, and whatever the environment is always exists in an organization, It always due to a constant change in nature, or we can talk about shape, character, persiveness, or whatever the forces or factors exist within the organization or outside the organization. For example, in a music industry, the audio cassettes was replaced by the CDs, and later on, the market of CD has also been affected due to the smartphones. And ultimately, at present, the film industry is getting more revenues from ringtones and the caller tunes rather than selling music CDs. So if we talk about in the traditional perspective, the audio cassette is always have you can say the scenarios which has been in the traditional times and has been replaced by CD, and later on it come up now later on the smartphones has been introduced and the market of CD has been demolished at present, and the film industry is totally dependent on the ringtones and the caller tones rather than selling off the CDs, because to have a ringtones and caller tones, this industry is making up the more revenues, and it keeps on changing from time to time, and that's called the dynamics of business environment. The next one is retainability. Retainability means when it differs from country to country and even region to region. So there is various economies or developed countries uh, like USA and UK who have a different perspective of business environment than the communist economies. So when we talk about the economic system in this particular characteristics, it always affects the environment of business. Let's take an example to understand these characteristics. In India, the Honda Activa 7G is expected to launch by mid 2022, but whereas in US the then G scooters is already launched. So there is a huge difference in the economic status of the countries, and which ultimately influence the environment of the business. Let's take where the India has been launched in 2022 Honda Activa 7G, and automatically in the US the 10G scooter has already been launched in that particular country. So automatically the economic environment is also which is an external force which ultimately affect the environment of the business into different countries as well. The next one is uncertainty. Business environment is largely uncertain because of the various external forces which affect the environment of the business, and it was very difficult to forecast the future environment in case of the companies or you can say firms. So when the environment is volatile and stable, so it would be very easier to make changes very fast, but ultimately for the future the uncertainties increases. Let's take an example to understand this characteristic. In some industries like fashion, film, information technology, it is very impossible to predict the future trends of all these industries. Ultimately, it keeps on changing from time to time, and uncertainty is always increasing in this industry because it depends upon the consumer demand and supply in that particular market, and it is very difficult to predict the future relate to this particular characteristic, that is uncertainty. The next one is multi-factor. When we talk about the multi-factor, there are various, you can say, industries which operated into a different parts of the countries, or especially when we talk about in India as well. So, due to the complexity, dynamic in nature, uncertainty of a business environment, there is always a continuous change in its shape, character, and scope of the business. We can talk about the natural calamities, that is COVID-19, which always shifted the learning of the students from offline to online. So automatically it's open a new opportunities for the edtech companies like Upgrade, Vidago, Seal, Educate, Topper, etc. And they have given this industry, this online personal computer industry has given a boost, an increase in demand for the tablets, where the online learning is always exists and the students can able to sit at home and learn. You can say whatever the structure of the topics which has been mentioned. So this is a way that multi-factor is also the one of the characteristics which open up the new, you can say, platforms to learn online through it. Next is far reaching impact. So, when we talk about the far reaching impact, it is very, you can say, important to understand about its effects and implications. And each business organization is operate into a certain own or unique environment. And of course, due to the external forces, this environment can easily be influenced. So let's take an example to understand this point. For example, the famous Wipro company was started in 1945 to manufacture and sell the vegetable oil. But in 1966, when this Azim Premji, who always has took over this company from his father and turned into an information technology. And at present, the Wipro is one of the world's largest and the most successful IT services company. So this is the way that how the business environment, you can say, helps. And again, the forces is always influenced, and of course, it will impact in a far reach, like the Wipro company has already reached and turned into a successful IT services company. So in the beginning, it's something a different perspective. Then again, the another person who has, you can say, take over this company and turn into the IT, and it's become the successful IT companies in India. Now we talk about the importance and the benefits of business environment. The first important or benefit is first mover advantage. It all business environment is always determine the opportunities, where the awareness of the environment is always help the businesses, the enterprises who always take an advantage of whatever the early opportunities come up in their own way, instead of losing them to competitors. Instead of that opportunity is immediately gone to competitors. So it's better off to take an advantage of such early opportunities rather than it goes to competitors. For example, the Maruti Suzuki become the leader in the small and car market, and it is one of the company who has recognized the need for small car on account of rising the petroleum prices or a large middle class. So it is also very important to take up one of the first mover, to become a first mover advantage and recognize or to understand the need of the small car in terms of the or due to the assessment of the consumers, and due to the and follow up to understand that there is a rising of petroleum prices, and of course for a large middle class, so there is a need exists, and Maruti Suzuki is become a leader in the small market. Next one is early warning signal. Environmental awareness is always a early warning signal, and it makes a firm aware of the impending threat or crisis so that it will minimize the adverse effect. For example, when a new firms enter into a mid segment cars, that we can call a trend, of course. So Maruti Suzuki immediately increased its esteem threefold company cars product, that is they immediately increase the production, and the company start faster delivery. So ultimately when they get a signal that new rivals and competitors enter into a, you can say, in car industry, then Maruti Suzuki has ultimately changed their services, like for example the fast delivery services. Their production has been increased, so ultimately that company has captured a substantial share of the market and become a leader of the that in this particular segment, so that the new rivals could not be able to enter into such segment. And that is, if a company get an early warning signal, then ultimately the company would take an immediate action so that they will not enter into that particular market. The next one is customer focus. So when we talk about the customer focus, environmental understand the management's team, which are very sensitive to adopt the changing needs and expectations of the consumer. So let's take an example to understand this point, that Hindustan Unilever and the several other fast-moving companies which have launched their new products like shampoo or any other products, they always realized the needs and wants and desires of the customers, and ultimately this move of these companies has always helped the firms to increase their sales of its own products. So why? Because the business environment has focused on the needs and wants and desires of the customers, and accordingly they implement and launch the shampoos. We can saw the small pouches of the shampoos and other products just to realize the needs of the customer, and this automatically help the firms that their sales would get definitely increased. The next characteristic is strategy formulation. So when we talk about the strategy formulation, it's always provide a relevant information about the business environment, and of course it serves as a base for strategy making. So it is very important to make in advance to prepare the strategies based on the information available within the organization. For example, the ITC company realized that there is a vast scope, or you can say, for growth in the travel and tourism industry in India, and the government is keen to promote this industry because of its employment potential. So there is a strategy when they have seen something growth in such industry, immediately the government is also interested in this particular industry because of its potential in employment rate. Change agents. So business leaders are always, you can say, involved and act as an agents of change. So these are the one who change from a ground root level, and ultimately it influence the business environment positively. For example, contemporary environment requires a prompt decision making, a quick decision making, a power to people. So business leaders are always encouraged to delegate authority to their staff so that no delay would be possible when it comes to take a sound decisions related on important matters. The next one is public image. So a business firm can also improve its image by showing up or due to an external forces of environment or any responsive to the aspirations of the public. For example, Reliance Industry, ICICI Bank and others have built up very reputed and brand name which are very sensitive and responsive to environmental forces. That is, like, we can talk about the political and the legal forces, we can talk about the technological forces, we can talk about you can say the marketing forces. So automatically these companies and industries already build up a public image, so they will always they are always sensitive to respond quickly on a environmental forces. The next one is continuous learning. So when we talk about the continuous learning, so the environmental analysis, that means the business environment serve a broad base and ongoing education for all those business executives or the new employees who are actually currently working in an organization. It always keep them in touch with the changing scenarios which are they actually unaware about it. So with the help of the continuous learning or online educations, manager will always help them in a very appropriate and efficient manner, which ultimately leads to the success of their organizations. Now we talk about a relationship between organization and its environment. How this relationship built just because of three main reasons. The first one is exchange of information. So the organization is always scan whatever the external environment or external forces of the environment, and the important information is necessary, and is generated after scanning, and it always helps the organizations to whatever the problem faced by them of or related to uncertainty or competitiveness, ultimately important decisions will take off. Such information is always gathered on an economic activities or related to the market conditions, social and demographic factors, technological developments, or any of the activities of the rival organization. It's keep on recording and gather whatever the important information irrespective of these forces, and accordingly the information would get exchanged from within the organization or the members of the outside the organizations. The second is exchange of resources. So when we talk about the besides the first factor of the relationship between organization and environment, there is also another you can say factor which always helps to build up a relationship, that is the exchange of resources. So to better off to produce goods and services by a farm, then it always needs inputs from its environment. They needs information. They needs resources like finance, material, manpower, equipment, so that whatever the inputs requires, they will interact between the organization and market. So these are the external internal forces of the organization where which they can prepare a finished products, and the resources are typically categorized into five M's, that is men, money, method, and machine and material. So these are the exchange of resources where the final product would be come up according to the base of the environment, that is called the internal environment or forces, which automatically affect the exchange of resources, and always with the help of these inputs it build up a really strong relationship between the organization and market. Let's talk about the exchange of influence and power. So, this is the third main reason that this exchange of influence and power is also built up a relationship between the organization and its environment. So, when we talk about this third reason, there are two aspects on this exchange. The first one is organization is conditioned and constrained, and the second one is organization may be well positioned. So when we talk about the organization is conditioned and constrained, that means the external forces will ultimately affect the activities, the tasks and operations of the organization. And of course, always the organization holds a considerable power over a firm due to the following reasons. The business environment is inclusive, that is internal. Their command on resources, information, and other inputs should be reliable. It offers the opportunities for the growth and the constraints on the other. So when we talk about the organization which may be well positioned, sometimes organizations enjoy their own power, and such power will automatically influence the external environment of the organization. It could be having a more and more command over information and resources, having a more freedom of actions on important decisions or important matters, having to mold uh, the environment on its own will. And in this way, when they have a command, they have a power, they have a freedom, they have an ability to mold its environment, internal environment of the organization. That means the organization may be well positioned. And the organization is conditional and constant when their conditions has been put on. It's inclusive, it's command over the information, resources, and other inputs, and of course it offers the opportunities for growth so that the organization can become and work towards for better perspectives on different we can say manner. Now we talk about the environmental influences on business. What would be the factors, environment factors, which ultimate influences on business? So as per the Berry M. Richmond and the Melvin Coppin, environmental factors are largely dependent not only on external and internal, but there are also the dependency level would get increased on the firms and their management who operate in specific country and varies from country to country. So environmental factors is totally dependent upon the control of the individual enterprises and industries and their management. So whatever you can say the levers within these companies and industries and their management, which have to operate in a specific country and varies from country to country. So these are the basically factors that the extent the business depends upon such a manner which interacts with its environment. If the business desire to be successful, of course, it has to study the various elements of the environment. A successful business has to identify the appraise and the respond to the various opportunities and threats in its environment. And accordingly, the business functions, it's a part of the broader environment which where the organization differs in terms of input, processes, and outputs as well. When we talk about the inputs, we talk about the dispose of outputs in a very mutually beneficial manner. The environment it's related to the external forces only. And it is very important when this input and output exchange activity, which always a continuous process over a long period of time, the environment influences the business in a very when there is active interaction with the external environment. So these are the ways where the interaction with the environment, various elements of the environment should consider, should identify, should respond and precise. The business function is also a part of the broader environment. So these are the particular parameters which always includes into an exchange of activities due to the interaction with the external environment. So external forces are actually important because they will give a warning signal to the organization to being active and run their day-to-day activities which are not being influenced by the external environment. The next one is components of business environment. So the first one is internal environment. Internal environment is also the one of the component of business environment, which includes the various factors like marketing skills, technology. We can talk about the human resources. Human resources. We can talk about the management, organizational structure, operational activities, these are the factors, the internal forces which are actually present inside the organization, and it affects one to another, depends upon the choices, activities, and the decisions of the organizations as well. And it ensures that the climate, the culture, the machines and equipments, whatever the operational processes, the management, the who the members involved in it, and of course, the management practices is always a part of the internal forces of business environment, or in other words, we can call that internal environments. So automatically, whatever the factors relate to the internal environment, it's under the control of the organization, which will automatically influence the business opportunity strategies and their own decisions due to such internal factors. And the factors which are involved are value system, which always turn as a regulatory framework, which are in terms of culture, climate, work process, management practices, and of course, the norms of the organizations. Next one is vision, mission, and objective. So whatever the company mission, it always show up its future position. Mission always defines the company type of business, and whatever the reasons for its existence and objectives is the aims of the company, and they just reach out to fulfill that objectives. The next one is organizational structure, which is also an internal part of the business environment. The structure of the organization is determined the ways, the techniques on which the activities are directed in an organization to achieve the ultimate goals. So it is a matrix structure. It is called a functional structure, divisional structure, and bureaucratic structure, which is a part, is a combination of the organizational structure. The next one is corporate culture. Corporate culture, we can talk about, in other words, the organizational structure where the value, beliefs, and behavior of the organization will actually assess the ways in which the employees and management communicate and manage all the external affairs of the organization efficiently and effectively. The next one is human resources. The human resource is the most valuable asset of the organization, as the success and failure of the organization depends on the human resources only, then how they will hire the best employees or best candidates for its own organization, and it totally depends on them only. The next one is physical resources and the technological capabilities. The physical resources, we can talk about the tangible assets of the organization, which always plays a very significant role to estimate the competitive nature or capability of the organization. And the technological, we talk about the technical know-how of the organization and how the company work or to adapt the technological know-how within the organizations. Next is external environment. External environment, a business does not operate within the internal nature. That means does not operate in a vacuum. The business operate in a very complex business environment, and of course, this would be affected their own business very well. These factors are actually happen outside the business, which are called the external factors and influences. and the external factors and the environment is not only affect the business internal functions, but of course they can create a pressure on the organization to rethink, to revisit, to redefine all of the objective and strategies is actually if necessary or if actually needed. There are two major types of external environment, that is microenvironment and macro environment. Microenvironment here the factors which are relate on the individual industries and companies, and macro environment we take it or consider as a whole, that means towards the country economy, which ultimately influence the economic growth and the economic development of the country. So we can refer here all those factors which automatically influence the economic growth and development of the nation. And micro, all those factors which ultimately influence the individual companies and you can say entrepreneurs. Now we talk about the types and forms of business environments. When we talk about types and forms of business environment, first we talk about the economic environment where all those factors which automatically influence the various parts of the business operations. Like we can talk about the cost, we can talk about the consumer behavior, we can talk about the profitability. So, whatever the factors which influence these costs, consumer behavior, profitability are actually called the economic growth, unemployment, inflation, poverty, market demand, any type of exchange rates. For example, the global financial crisis of 2008 deeply affected the business environment. So the globe, if we talk about the international financial crisis, ultimately it affects the whole business of the nation. The next one is competitive environment. Competition is a very significant part of the business where the company compete for customers and their financial successes. So ultimately, it's better to know the strength and the weakness of the competitor, properly assess the competitors' profile, their pricing strategies, their marketing strategies, their unique selling points, whatever the effective strategies is required to attract customers could be prepared and maintain a competitive environment. So understanding these changes, that how the companies could succeed in the market, these are the parameters that the companies look upon. For example, during the smartphone, you can see scenarios. Apple, Samsung, and Huawei were all the competitors for the market share, and the competition between these companies always to continue because of the innovation, and they always add a new products and features according to the customers' behavior and the preferences. So these are the way of the competitive environment where the three main companies will belong to smartphones, and actually they are continuously you can say innovate and adapt a new features and products into market for their own consumers or for a new consumers as well. Next one is technological environment. So technology in business is always influence the operational activities, the operational efficiency of the company. So automatically, when we talk about the technologies, it always prefer to integrate the new technologies and adopt within the organizations like artificial intelligence, digital platforms, which always have a potential to increase the customer engagements. For example, the rise of Amazon, which is called one of the leading e-commerce platform, is a evidence of the technological advancement who has transformed retail, including the online payment system, logistic, data analyst. So this Amazon is always have a global icon when it comes to the e-commerce platform and has become a very successful when it comes to a digital transformation system. The next one is legal and regulatory environment. So when we talk about the legal and regulatory environment, which always talk about the legislation, rules and regulation that the organization has to follow. For example, avoiding the penalties, protecting the one reputation and finances is always a crucial factors which always need to communicate between the companies about their changes and regulatory measures. We can talk about the innovations, we can talk about the growth and how we can save uh, safeguards the interest of the society and the individuals. Let's take an example. We can talk about the one of the good example over here that is called the GST, the introduction of goods and service tax, which was introduced in India in 2017, has replaced many of the indirect taxes like VAT and SAT, which always simplifies the tax system and created a single market across the country. And that is also the one of the example of the legal and regulatory environment. Next one is social environment. We talk about here in this particular type of environment, the consumer behavior, the preferences, the demographic factors in the market, which always influenced the social environment of the business. And this performance. We can talk about here the SWOT analysis, where we can talk about the organizational strength, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities. And when we talk about these evaluations of all of this organization, then ultimately leads to a proper sound decision processes. And this analysis is always helps to build up a strategies with the firm environment basis only. So it depends, the strategies will be prepared according to the environment. It could be relate to the technological environment, it could relate to the economic environment. Utility of environment analysis. So it always helps the particular strategists in the following manner, that how to anticipate the opportunities, how the planning is to be made to or to take optimal responses on to these opportunities. In a developing scenario, in a developing countries, always there is an early warning systems to all those countries to prevent from the threats. Or in developing countries, the strategies can be prepared to turn a threat to the firm advantage as well. The next one is what are the goals of the environmental analysis? There are three basic goals. The first is to provide an understanding of the current and potential changes which would take place in a particular business environment, to prepare the company or to provide all those inputs to take up a strategic decision making, to facilitate and foster the strategic thinking in an organization, that how to increase the strategic thinking in the organizations as well. Now we talk about the importance of environmental analysis. So when we talk about the environmental analysis or scanning, we can always talk about the that type of process where organization could monitor their relevant environment so that they can identify the opportunities and threats which affect their businesses. It's not like scanning is all about it, how much the impact of different events, issues, trends, and expectations have its in its own business in operations. So the firms which are systematically have to analyze and diagnose the environment, which are very more effective than those which do not. For example, let's take an example to understand this concept. Some Indian farms have suffered considerably because they failed to appreciate the tightening regulations against environmental pollution. Of course, there are plenty of the companies who are always work to control the environmental pollution or like for example, air pollution. So it always failed because whatever the regulations has been made by the country, it's failed automatically just because of the non-valuation of the people, and ultimately leads to environmental pollution. So this is how the companies has to look upon what would be the issues and expectations, the threats that actually occur due to the we can say one of the major issue of environmental pollution. Next one is steps of environmental scanning. So the first one is scanning, monitoring, forecasting, and assessing. When we talk about scanning, we can observe the environment, what will be the potential outcomes and factors which are very important for the future. Monitor, provide a picture of what is happening and what has already happened. So on the basis of that evaluation, we can come up to the next step, that is forecast. So use all of the information to predict what will happen in the future, and evaluate the information whether it would be right or wrong, and how the environmental changes will impact the organization. There are also the other steps of environmental analysis or scanning, that is the gathering information, considering competitors, and examining strategies. So when we talk about the gathering, collect the information about the environmental factors and just evaluate them. Gathering, considering competitors, gather information about your competitors. Examining strategies, just evaluate the current and future strategies so that in order to determine that how the environmental changes will actually impact the organization. So in this way, the environmental analysis will help all of the businesses and the companies or the entrepreneurs to prepare for the future by identifying the strengths and opportunities. We know that every organization has strength and their weaknesses, but it is also equally important to understand the threats and opportunities as well. Environmental scanning. What is environmental scanning? It consists of both external and internal factors, and success of the organization depends upon these factors. So, knowledge of environmental scanning, that means the evaluation process of internal and external factors which ultimately influence the performance of the organization is very important. So to gain environmental scanning is actually a tool on which the business can obtain the knowledge about their environmental factors. So accordingly, they can predict the factors for the future. So environmental scanning is an ongoing tracking of the trends, what would be the occurrences in our organizational internal and external environment. Depends its success, it depends on these factors only to predict about the future incidences or occurrences, and whatever the results could be, it's useful for shaping up the goals and strategies of the organization. In other words, it is a process by which the organizations monitor their relevant environment to identify the threats and opportunities, and accordingly they can take up the soundful strategic decisions. It is also one of the process to gather the information regarding the company environment, analyze and forecast whatever the predictable environment could be possible in future, and accordingly they will change it. It also helps the manager to decide the whatever the future path of the organization as well. So these are the factors which are need to be considered in environmental scanning. The first one is environment. The first one is events. So these are the you can see the certain happening, what would happen in the internal and external organizational environment which can be observed and tracked. So how these factors, whether internal and external organizational factors, can be tracked, can be observed, is through environmental scanning only. The next one is trends. Trends are the general tendencies that what sort of action would be taken along with or when the if any event would take place. So trends are the grouping of the you can say the relative or the similar events from beginning to end, so that their their particular pattern of change in a particular area will get to know whether they will move in a given direction, they will increase or decrease in the strength or frequency of the observations. So observation, trends, direction is a part of the trends, and how the particular, you can say, the action, the strategy would work on a particular issue. That this is a way that how the trend analysis would work. That's which is called the cyclical trends. In case the environmental scanning would be a tool, a strategic tool to work or to identify the strength, the trends. The next one is issues. Issues are the current concern which always gives a response to the events and the trends as well. So it was very difficult that how to identify the issue, and which is the one of the most challenging tasks. So emerging issues is always start with the value shift or any of the change occurred, that how this issue is to be viewed, is to be solved, and how the action is to be taken off by the organization. And the last one is expectations. The expectations are the demands which are made by the interested groups when there is any issues or the concern will always come into a light. So events, trends, and issues are the factors which are need to be considered in the environmental scanning, and accordingly, whatever the events would occur, any trends, changes would goes on, any issues would came to know, and what would be the expectations when of all those groups, interested groups, when any of the concern or issues come into a light. So these are the factors which are very, you can say, useful and need to be considered in environmental scanning. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening this lecture and namaste to all. तो 5 मिनट है तो जल्दी खत्म हो गया. It's finished.